yet. I think now all eyes are on this potential ground invasion that might take place. It's becoming increasingly imminent based on the information that's coming out. Israel wants to go in. There are suggestions that it's going this time to try to occupy northern Gaza, and that Netanyahu's peace offering to the Israelis who are protesting on the street against him and blaming him for what they call to be the greatest crisis to Israel since 1948. Netanyahu believes that the best way to resolve it is to take more land from the Palestinians, give it to the Israeli settlers, and they'll forgive him for it. The problem is there are three obstacles that Israel and Washington are scrambling to try to resolve before they begin a ground invasion. The first is the issue of where the Palestinians will go. And that's why there's heavy pressure on Sisi in Egypt to open the Rafah crossing. I've seen a lot of criticism of Sisi that it's callous that he's kept the Rafah crossing closed. But I do think, and I'm not defending him, if I was in a position, I'd open it. But I do think that one of the reasons Sisi doesn't want to open it is because he knows that the Israelis want to drive the Palestinians into the Sinai Peninsula, where they will live in new refugee camps, and then the Israelis will never allow them to return afterwards, after they finish their ground operation. And Sisi fears going down in history as being complicit in a new Nakba in Gaza. The second obstacle is Iranian proxies. There's deep concern that Hezbollah in Lebanon, is waiting for the Israelis to get bogged down in Gaza, because the Israelis don't have a very good history of ground operations in Gaza. Every time they go in, they struggle, they get bogged down, they end up with a lot of casualties. There's concern that once they go into Gaza, Hezbollah will cross over from the north. And those who remember 2008, 2009, it's generally considered that the Israelis lost to Hezbollah, that Netanyahu was unable to subdue them in the last war with Hezbollah. And the third obstacle is public opinion. As a result of social media breaking Israel's monopoly on the narrative, as a result of everybody sharing Palestinian content, as a result of the liberation of the algorithms, particularly on Twitter and the like, allowing pro-Palestinian content, popular pro-Palestinian content, to appear on new homepages and the like, Israel is struggling with the narrative. And anybody who opens Washington Post, you'll notice that underneath the headline about Blinken's visit to Saudi and Egypt, Washington Post describes that the reason for Blinken's visit was to ask Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and these countries to try to tone down public opinion. And we're seeing videos now of some scholars in Saudi who are now saying that citizens should stop talking about Gaza because Wali al-Amr is the one who knows about the issue, and that all of your analysis is causing an unnecessary burden. So these are the three obstacles now to a ground invasion. There are reports that the Americans have sent a 3-star Marine general to Israel today to discuss the risks, according to some of the reports, the risks of a ground invasion. Biden is trying to pressure the Israelis to hold off on the ground invasion. They're not sure whether it's wise or not. And the final thing that's worth mentioning on this is that the Hamas and the other Palestinian factions are trying to fend off the ground invasion. There are reports that the Red Cross is now to receive 50 hostages of dual nationality that are due to be released as a result of negotiations with Qatar. The idea being that if they can release those 50 dual nationalities, then the Americans can get the Israelis to put off the ground invasion. But the one thing that is worth noting here is the idea of the ground invasion suggests that Netanyahu has the initiative and he is the one in the ascendancy. But the reason Netanyahu is going into the ground invasion is because no matter how much he bombs Gaza, he's unable to wipe away the humiliation that he's suffered at the hands of the Palestinians, and also the humiliation that he suffered in that breaking of the monopoly on the narrative. I assume that you're in the US, but we've seen videos here on social media of DeSantis, the Republican candidate, going into a supermarket trying to say Israel has the right to self-defense, and Americans responding and saying, we don't believe you anymore because of what we've seen. So I think that the public opinion, Iran, and the issue of where to put the Palestinians are the reasons why it's been delayed. But all talk, to answer your question directly, all talk is on an imminent ground invasion. Nobody knows when, but it's certainly building up to it.
I'm going to ask one question, then I'm going to turn it over to Sheikh Haroon. I don't know if you've ever met, but you can find him on Twitter, Sheikh Haroon Saleh. You're still on Twitter, right?
I am.
50-50.
Yeah, I tried to get off, but I felt like I had to get back on to kind of
talk about this stuff.
Yeah. To add and to help at least dictate the points.
Sheikh Haroon is from Palestine. You are also from Palestine?
I'm from North Africa, where Algerians are renowned for their support for Palestine.
Okay, mashallah, mashallah.
One people.
Yep.
Yeah,
we saw in the World Cup how there were more Palestinian flags than Moroccan flags held by the Moroccan fans. So Allah reward them for that. I want to ask you the first question. I was thinking yesterday, the public opinion worldwide is now swaying, maybe not in America, but in the rest of the world, it's swaying against Israel hard. It's not hard to fathom and to imagine the Mossad doing something, inflicting something upon themselves so egregious, okay, that will then be pinned onto Hamas and justify all this all over again. Because the public opinion is going so far, I believe that's a possibility. What are your thoughts on that?
I think certainly it's a possibility, and we've already seen the attempts to do that. I think that when you remember the story of the 40 beheaded babies and the way that it was proliferated on mainstream media and amongst Israeli allies, I think the reason that story went so wide, or why it was really pushed, was because the videos that were coming out actually showed magnanimous fighters coming out. There was Channel 12 in Israel where the woman says, they came into my house, they said they won't hurt me because they're Muslim, and then one of them asked me for a banana and they left after 2 hours. There was an interview with the Israeli radio which was caught live, and the section was later deleted, of a woman who described that when the Palestinians came in, they didn't harm any civilians, but when the Israelis came to liberate it, they shot some of the hostages and shot some of the Israelis in order to try to say that the Palestinians did it. There's also deep concern for anybody who follows Israeli journalists that a lot of the families of the hostages in Israel itself are complaining that Netanyahu is showing no regard for the hostages, that he's going in and that they're not a priority, that he prioritizes the annexation of the Gaza Strip over the lives of those particular hostages. And that's why I think that Israel has been pushing it. If you remember the hospital, when they bombed the hospital, Al Ahli Hospital, and they tried to blame it on a Hamas rocket, which was later debunked by forensic investigators and OSINT and the like, because there is this deep concern about the shift in public opinion. And you were saying maybe not in America, but the polls that came out 2 days ago suggest that at least 54% of Americans are now in favor of an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. They're no longer buying, and that's unprecedented for the US. And in the UK, we have a YouGov poll, which is one of the reliable pollsters, that says that more than 76% of Britons are in favor of an immediate ceasefire. And that's quite simply unprecedented. So I think that when you talk about the concern about Mossad staging something, they've already tried to stage something with regards to the 40 beheaded babies. They tried to stage something by saying that the woman was killed and paraded on the streets, and then Newsweek later published and said that she was actually being taken to a hospital where she was receiving treatment. They tried to say that there were rapes that occurred, but then the eyewitness accounts of Israeli settlers themselves said we never saw any of these things that the Israelis are saying. And that's why it's important to stress here, and it builds on your point, as Dr. Asim Qureshi from Cage said on Twitter when I was reading it. He said, you know, the Israelis are telling us what is happening, but the Palestinians are showing us what is happening. And it's becoming abundantly clear through social media that the vivid images of what's happening is forcing the shift in social media. And so while your question implies that Mossad might do something, I would stress they have, and they are failing so far as a result of public opinion. When you ask Sheikh Harun, are you still using Twitter? And he says, I'm using Twitter because I want to promote the Palestinian cause. The reality is this war of narratives is being won on social media. BBC presenter apologized, not because the BBC editorial board said she did anything wrong. She apologized because the social media was so overwhelming and the feedback was so overwhelming, they had no choice but to apologize. CNN, the reason they apologized was not because the Israelis said we're unhappy with your narrative. They apologized because the social media wave was so huge, they had to apologize. Sky News, which I never thought would ever apologize for any content on Palestine, came out and apologized because their presenter Kay Burley had said that the Palestinian ambassador said the Israelis had it coming, and Sky News apologized for that publicly. The State Department in the US, you have the resignation of one of the main directors, and Blinken has to hold a listening session 2 days ago with his staff to plead with them not to resign because they're feeling the pressure from social media. So I think that it's true that Mossad might be planning something more, and I'll finish on this point, but the point is that they have tried, they have pushed, and they're failing every single time, not because of government campaigns by Muslim nations or the like, but because of the ordinary people using their social media and demanding the proof of the veracity of all information. That's what's making them crumble. And this is why what's important to note here is this is genuinely a battle where you can see the real impact of the mobilization of the Ummah and all allies of justice outside of the Ummah.
It's a great time actually for anyone who cares about journalism, epistemology, tawatur, and tawatur cannot be denied. Right. And this is what they call the new media, where everyone's little cell phone combined together actually brings you certainty, yields certainty, and exposes lies.